The first edition of Science Women Imagineers, where we come bring the best minds of women in engineering. My name is Shilpa Fadnis, and I will be moderating today's panel discussion on riding the digital wave, opportunities for women technologists. But before we do a deep dive into the panel, I would want to share a few points. Imagineer attempts to raise the profile of women who are excelling in engineering, as well as to inspire future generation of talent to enter the profession. Getting to equal is not just a boardroom agenda. Accelerating a culture of equality that has never been more critical for driving innovation. As many as 40% of Indian graduates in STEM discipline are women. But if you look at the ranking, we are 19 in employing them. According to the World Economic Forum Gender Gap Report, it'll take 257 years to bridge the existing gender gap in the global workforce, and India ranks 112 in the Global Gender Gap Index. Pay parity is a great leveler, but there are many reasons that perpetuate the cycle of gender pay gaps. Lack of diversity is one of the reasons at the top. Even as India presents a complex gender paradox, we have come a long way in creating a culture of equality where everyone belongs. In today's topic discussion, riding the digital wave, opportunities for women technologists, we will discuss how vital a call to action is in increasing the representation of women technologists across all levels. Besides progressive regulatory environment, companies are furthering their commitment to catalyze change and foster fairness across demographic groups, recognizing disparities and changing the course of pay anomaly. It's time we crack the code and together. And to discuss this, we have a power-packed panel today. Sangeeta Gupta is the Chief Strategy Officer for NASSCOM. Welcome to the show, Sangeeta. Thank you, Sangeeta. Sangeeta is an economics major from Delhi School of Economics. Sangeeta has been a part of the IT industry shaping India's $190 billion IT story. Karthik Natarajan is the President and Chief Operating Officer of Cyient. Welcome, Karthik.
Thanks, Shilpa.
Having spent over 2 decades in engineering and technology services, he has been instrumental in implementing engineering strategies for Fortune 500 customers. He has a very strong leadership team and is one of the proponents of diversity and inclusion. Welcome, Karthik. Supriya Danda is the Vice President and Country Manager of Western Digital. She is passionate about technology and people, and she strongly believes in equality at the workplace and in giving back to the community for building a sustainable future. Welcome, Supriya.
Thank you, Shilpa.
Britta Osher is the site leader for Germany for Ansem, a Cyient company. She has led cross-functional teams with a combination of technical expertise and business acumen. She is a loving mom of 2 teenage boys. Welcome, Britta.
Thank you.
Paul Robichaud was born and raised in Greater Chicago. He received a Bachelor of Science degree in Biological Sciences from Southern Illinois University. After an illustrious career in sales, marketing, engineering across continents, Paul moved to Chennai in 2004 and established a garments manufacturing unit that employs 90% women in an industry that primarily employs men. Welcome, Paul. We have Helene Trehin. She's a military strategist by education. Helene has started her career Sorry about that. Helene started her career in the French Ministry of Defense before moving to the engineering world. Since April, Helene is the Chief of Staff of ELOS, an engineering and investment company dedicated to the promotion and implementation of circular economy principles, which is by way advocates for a greater diversity. Welcome, Helene.
Thank you, Shilpa.
Thank you so much to all our panelists. Let's kick off this discussion with Sangeeta and Karthik. Sangeeta, over to you first. Engineering R&D is one of the fastest growth drivers for the Indian IT sector. It grew 11% to touch $33 billion in the 2019-20 financial year. The sector is poised to touch about $60 billion by 2025. We are so proud to see Bangalore is also being recognized as one of the top 10 technology hubs. I just wanted to hear from you. You witnessed the growth of the Indian IT story so closely. If you can share how the future blueprint is going to look for this industry and the role of engineering R&D.
Thank you, Shilpa, and a very warm welcome to all the panelists. It's an honor to be among some established women and men joining us here. I think, Shilpa, as you rightly said, the engineering R&D as well as the technology sector in India has been India's growth engine. As of March 2020, it's a 190 billion plus sector, employs over 4 million people, countless number of multinationals and Indian companies, innovative startups that are building out different products and solutions. So there is a whole lot happening in the sector, and even if you look at the current environment and the pandemic that is hitting us, I think this is one sector that is trying to stay ahead despite all the health crisis as well as the economic crisis that we are dealing with. What do you think is driving this growth? One, I think technology no more is about enabler of business. It has become the business, right? So every company wants to be a technology company. They know that if they have to stay ahead, it is going to be about technology. And in this environment, if especially the India and the ER&D sector particularly can be at the forefront of building new products, solutions, whether it's around autonomous cars, whether it's about 5G connectivity, whether it's about remote sensors. There's just so much opportunity around us to make all this happen. I think we're really in a sweet spot where the combination of India's technology expertise, the ER&D base and the foundation that we've built up, we're poised for much higher aspirations than the 60 billion also, Shilpa, that you spoke about.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Karthik, do you want to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think what Sangeeta covered definitely is something that I agree, and I've seen this industry growing in the last 2 decades. And I also want to take all of us in the journey of last 100 years. So if you really look at it, the Spanish flu of 1918, I think that has created a birth of a socialized healthcare and employer-based insurance plans, and also public health at the international level. So if you fast forward World War II between 39 to 45, I think post that women stepped up to take up jobs largely held by men, and driving acceleration of women workforce participation. So fast forward again 9/11, I think this has reshaped the transportation and the security policies worldwide, and this has really created increased screening and surveillance that all of us have accepted as real norms of activities. So similarly, what I definitely believe is this COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic would create a significant acceleration to digital transformation. So that is given. And specific to the ER&D ambition that we have, though you talked about 60 billion, Shilpa, we still want to hold to see how do we cross 75 to 80 billion dollars. I think that's the ambition that we have. Probably by 2027, we should be close to 100 billion. To achieve that, we need about million plus engineers. So it took the industry about 2 decades to build about 650,000 engineers. We want to do this probably in half the time and twice the capacity. We won't be able to get there unless we have women participation increasing significantly. So if you look at currently, we have about 15% women participating in the ER&D's business, and we really want this to double or triple in the next 10 years. So this is going to be a decade of women participation in the digital and technology transformation journey, and would really look forward to hear from some of our fellow participants in this panel. How can we really make this as a reality in the next 10 years?
Thanks, Karthik. So, Priya, coming to you, Sangeeta and Karthik started on a very optimistic note. They've really furthered the projection. It's not 60 billion, but over north of $70 billion. So, if you can just take us through some of the diversity agenda that your company is also driving and how you're personally involved in it so that you can make this dream come true.
Thanks, Shilpa. I think the stage has been beautifully set by yourself, Sangeeta, and Karthik. Numbers do tell a story. I lead a data storage company, and when we look at the data, to continue the positive conversation, I was looking at the last 10 years, and we've grown from 20% to a 35% with women in IT and the tech sector. I think it's always good to look at the progress we have made because positive optimism is what's going to give us energy to go forward. There's always a lot more to be done, but I think positively, there are forces which are aligned. Now, overlay the COVID on top of it. It does give us an opportunity to say, we always have looked at flexibility as being one of the key things to keep women in the force. So I think there are two things we are looking at. We are looking at the context of COVID today in terms of presenting us both a challenge and an opportunity. The opportunity is it's a lot more level playing field. The regimes of control have given it to a lot more influence. The regime of face to face has given it to kind of work from anywhere and lead a virtual team. I think it does give us opportunity to bring in women from workforce and have them join, and also what is important is to have them stay. It's almost like you got to bring in more and make sure that they don't exit. So I think it's we got to balance at both the ends. When I joined Sandisk in 2012 and then it got acquired by Western Digital, I'll just say one thing that within a few months, gender diversity was a key part of my agenda that I wanted to drive. And it was looking at five things: it's to hire, grow, network, develop, and engage. So you can't just hire women at the entry level and then move on. You can't just, you got to kind of keep it sustaining and make sure there are interventions at each level. And I'm sure as the conversation progresses and warms up, we'll be happy to share those. But I think across the life cycle, strategic agenda on the CEO is the only way, a critical way, that this is going to continue making progress. And we will have faster and more accelerated numbers to talk about. So I would say CEO's agenda and a life cycle strategy is what it is needed. It's just not a one-off game to come in and do a program and walk away.
Thank you, Supriya. Paul, I'm coming to you. You've heard what Supriya said, how it's part of the leadership's agenda. I see that you have vast experience across continents in the engineering domain, and it is very heartening to see that you set up a center in Chennai that employs 90% women in an industry that's primarily dominated by men. You have witnessed a first-hand growth trajectory of women's participation in this industry. What do you think of a career roadmap for a woman engineer entering her job um, as a first timer? If you just look back, how do you see things have really transformed over the last 15 years?
Thank you, Shilpa. And Supriya, I concur with a lot of the things that she said. It's absolutely right. You have to have D&I initiatives have to start from the top. In fact, science is a good example. They also have a management push from the top to make sure that diversity and inclusion is something that's an objective that they stick to and that they're always pursuing.
Paul, are you able to hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we just lost you for a few seconds. We can hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me? I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm on my phone and something happened there. But anyway, the bottom line is it has to start with top management in order to filter down, because no one will listen if it isn't pushed from the top. And so, but anyway, the other part of your question, there's two parts. I was in manufacturing, and when I first came to India 15 years ago, and at the time I started a garment manufacturing unit, and in 2012, I had an opportunity to create a manufacturing unit that serviced the automobile industry, or the auto industry, actually two-wheelers. And at the time, I had been doing garments, and I'd realized the productivity that I had with a primarily female manufacturing unit. And we had managers that were female as well as the employees themselves. And when I brought this to the people in the auto business, they were very skeptical. They said, no, women can't do this. There's too many aspects of it that are too difficult. There's, certain strength is involved. They weren't for it. And they really were adamant that this not happen this way. But I was equally adamant that it could happen because I'd been working with all of these people for the previous 8 years, and I knew what they were capable of. So we set about setting up this unit, and long story short, within 4 months, our productivity was better than the unit that was 99% men, and we were 15% more productive. And it was in a manufacturing environment, and in the auto business, if any of you have had any exposure, it's a very male-dominated business. But the moral of the story is that women can do anything they set their minds to, and if you give them the opportunity, they're more than happy to perform. And the second part of the question is, what does the future look like in terms of women in engineering? And 15 years ago, people weren't talking much about D&I. They weren't talking much about diversity and inclusion. They weren't talking about gender diversity. They were just trying to survive, grab as many people in the workforce as they could and shove them into the office and have them start working. But over the last 15 years, there's been a gradual shift. And the shift has been created because companies, large companies and small companies, realize the importance of diversity and inclusion. They realize the importance of having gender diversity in their organizations, because the numbers show that companies that are more inclusive and diverse are more productive than those that are not. Companies that have a larger percentage of women are more productive than those that have a lower percentage of women. And those companies are more successful, more productive, and ultimately the bottom line reflects it. So all of a sudden, whether the thing about it is, people should want to do it because it's the right thing. Women should have the opportunity to enter the workforce and do any type of job they aspire to do. And that's the good part. And I believe many of the people now that are in management positions want to do just that. But the other side is the business side, which helps the other side. And that is, again, companies are better off when there's more women in the workforce. And so with that, that's the main points I wanted to make. And thank you for today, and good luck to everyone.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. I would like to bring in Sangeeta and Karthik here, talking about the skills of the future. How is it, if you can call out some of the skills taxonomy, what it was, if you look at the past, how it's really evolved over the last few years. Can you help us with some of the new skills that you think are really going to make it big in the future? Sure.
So Shilpa, maybe I can start and let Karthik do all the hard talk. But as NASSCOM has been looking at what are some of the future skills that are needed for the industry to to really emerge as the hub for digital talent. I think the few things that are standing out are obviously skills in all the new technology areas, whether it's about being a cloud architect, whether it's about being a data visualizer, whether it's being product engineering as a theme is very, very strong. AR, VR specialists, I think there's a lot of focus around, especially in this extended reality world, how do you really become a specialist in the whole world of AR and VR? So I think NASSCOM has mapped out what are the skills of the future. So they are about, 8 technologies, 55 job roles, 155 different skills that we've articulated. And I think for anybody who's either looking for a student who wants to skill herself or an existing employee who wants to upskill themselves, there is a whole taxonomy of skill sets and job roles that are needed for the future. Of course, this will continue to evolve because technology is changing at such a rapid pace that what may be relevant today is not something that may be relevant 3 years from now. So it's going to be a continuous learning curve, but there is a skill set, taxonomy that we have published and is available on our future skills portal.
Thanks, Sangeeta. Karthik, would you like to, from an industry standpoint, if you can talk about the future skills pipeline?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think, as I said, we are looking for about 1 million engineers in the next 10 years in the year-ending workforce. And if I were to really go down, probably we need more than 500,000 software engineers. And we probably need at least about 100,000 Scrum Masters. And we need at least about 10,000 product managers and at least 1,000 CTOs and CDOs. and 100 plus CEOs who can become potentially a startup around the ER&D area. So we see that there is a significant potential. And I also want to bring out from the current context of working from home, that means you can acquire any skill remotely. And we were on another panel with Coursera India CEO. He talked about the percentage of people picking up the online courses has gone up by 1,400 percentage in the last 6 months as compared to the previous 12 months. So you can imagine that they can probably skill themselves a lot more easily today compared to the in the past, and also with a lot of empathy related design aspects coming into the future. I think that's where women have a very important role to play, humanizing the design and the hyper personalization with increased focus on customer experience, and all this is getting into play, and which is going to be a right platform for women to really step up. I think it's important for them to look at skilling is one area, and getting themselves relevant and ready for it would really provide a right platform for them to get into the mainstream.
Sure. Thanks, Karthik. Supriya, I just wanted to hear from you at Western Digital. Have you created structured programs for learning and development in the areas which you've identified as hot skills? Can you take us through some of those?
We have, Shilpa. Being a data company, and it's kind of critical that you have a lot of technology focus areas that you do. So we do it across the levels. Early on, like Sangeeta and Karthik have very wonderfully pointed out, there are a lot of technology skills that you would need. Clearly, you would need an AI program. That is the thing. Every day you open the newspaper and you see the AI skill is like, oh my God, it's like a hockey stick. It's outstanding growth. So there is no way you would not equip your women engineers in that. And other associated ML and few other associated technologies. For us, storage domain is very critical, and therefore, when you hire, let's say, from a campus, you do look at an opportunity that there is a very little storage domain expertise in India, and therefore we have a 3-week boot camp, which I wouldn't say we do only for women. We do it for women and men alike because we want to make sure it's a bridge. We give you the skills, and then you can go up. We have an innovation. How do you build? How do you design stuff? And how do you file patents and trade secrets? That's a very critical program. We make sure that, let's look at the journey from engineer to inventor. We do that. But I'll take a moment and talk about what do we specifically do for women, because as much as the entry level is not an issue, Shilpa, what happens is the drain that happens across the levels. And therefore, there is very little that reaches the middle and the top. How do you plug that, and how do you make sure that leakage is not happening? What we do is there are networks that we make. We also do an advanced women leadership program where we look at who has the potential, and therefore teach them skills like sound business strategy, financial understanding. I mean, as you go up the ladder, you will realize it's not the engineering design, but it's the trade-offs with business that you need to make. What is the trade-off? How much of feature do you need to put in, and versus vis-a-vis your time to go to market? Those are trade-offs that kind of become very critical part of you being an engineering woman leader. And I think those are some of the skills we take care, in our advanced program. We do it at the HQ. We also do it across our partnership with India, some of the consultants we work with. We also make sure there is an opportunity to have women come in from outside as role models. You look at Sangeeta, Britta, Sai, and of course you look at Helen, and you look at Karthik and Paul. But if we can have more women role models, so we look at women in entrepreneurship, women in our techno leaders. We look at HQ and outside. Every month there is a real women, real inspiration series wherein women come talk, and their problems and ours. At the end of the day, we are all in it together. So you say, well, you've dealt with it, I can deal with it. Well, I have 2 children, and you kind of did not step, the foot off the accelerator. You kind of just mildly took it off, but you didn't go out of the system. And therefore, I can do it too. If you can do it, I can. So I think building those stories, all of that has helped. So to sum up, I'm saying we do 2 things. We make sure that we work with women in developing, networking, and kind of growing them, making sure they stay with us longer. And we build in technical and the leadership skills. But we also make sure that we kind of make sure we socialize overall, because agenda is for everyone to do this together. So we bring in men as allies, we bring in leadership, diversity champions, so that we work with unconscious biases. And I know every company is doing that, and we all need to do our bit till we have an equal world. But I think this is kind of, we make sure that we work on culture, women in leadership and also make sure that technical and domain skills are also equally relevant. So I think it's combination of everything coming together that hopefully we are working towards a more inclusive workplace than we were perhaps a year back.
Thanks, Supriya. Sai, I want to hear you. Sorry, apologies, I didn't introduce you. Sai is the Director for New Business Development, heading the APAC region. Sai, digital is enabling women explore careers that they previously didn't venture into. How do you think women's leadership and management style that you have looked up in your organization has helped you groom as a leader?
Sure. Thanks, Shilpa. And, basically, I'm obviously very honored and delighted to be sharing this platform with eminent leaders of the industry. Now, to answer your question on, how are women exploring career paths that they previously never ventured into, right? I would like to look at three factors that are enabling women to consider careers. One is basically the access. Now, when you talk of access, and both Karthik and Sangeeta spoke about the n number of new technologies, whether it's edge technologies, automation, artificial intelligence, and in the industry that I particularly focus on, it's about autonomous trucks, autonomous drills, autonomous plants. So all of these, this digital and this technological innovation, what is it doing? It's actually creating a skill gap, or demand supply skill gap, because the amount of automation that's going on obviously needs a support from a workforce that obviously need to deploy it, maintain it, improve it, and manage it. And look at an autonomous truck, right? We are sitting here and thinking it's replacing a driver, it's replacing jobs, people, but ideally the amount of data that's being thrown out by the autonomous truck obviously needs a lot of people to look at the data, analyze it, and look and see, how can we improve the safety aspect? How can we improve the, reliability of the asset? And I think that is creating a massive opportunity. One. Second, access to internet and mobile, right? A lot of people I've personally known, who were graduates but who were homemakers, have stepped on to having flourishing e-commerce business because of their access to digital and mobile. And I think the third is basically how industry leaders, and this is really interesting because industry leaders are having an agenda to drive innovation, and it's starting right from the top. All of us over here agree to that. But what is that doing in terms of how we are influencing or disrupting traditional supply chains, right? And again, I'll take the example of the mining industry, and these are mining majors that are going back to the heavy equipment manufacturers and asking for equipment that can be operated by women. Typically, there was obviously the way the manufacturing machinery or heavy machinery was very aligned to the way men would operate it, but that's now changing. And what is that doing? It's creating access again to women, and it's helping them play at a level playing field with men. The second is about enablement. The whole the digitalization, access to training using virtual reality. I think there it has become a lot more that simpler in terms of how we access training. How are we accessing tools and technologies and helping us learn and understand the way we are operating. And I think it's also about like Karthik was mentioning, 6 months back we were sitting and discussing with the HR and saying, I think as a part of diversity and initiative we should allow flexible working, and the whole thing about trust issues, productivity, and all of those questions were being asked. But here we are, working in a very flexible environment that is allowing women to think, and ask themselves and say, maybe I could have a career because, I can work in this environment as much as anyone else. And I think that really helps in not only hiring women, but how are we, that we're retaining them and developing them. And the third is really around momentum. Representation is very important. 6 years back, I was thinking, I want to do a sales job, and I thought about, would I be comfortable with the travel associate and all of that. I looked at women leaders in my company who were salespeople, who were, managing families, doing it very effectively. And I thought, why not I? And I think that sort of a representation matters. It's breaking the inertia, and it's developing a lot in terms of just helping gain the overall momentum. Now, your second question on what women leadership styles and managements and how can they bring in the difference. I think what digital is doing in terms of enabling us is fantastic, but what it's also doing is creating those silos. We are no longer able to sit in a conference room with our colleagues and deliberate on a problem and be able to engage and converse. We're actually confined to the spaces of our rooms or our houses, and that really is obviously calls for a different management style. And I think the management style that really is going to be effective in this environment, especially that causes a lot of stress and anxiety, is a very empathetic management style, a management style that looks for how well are we federating our teams, how are we collaborating, how are we communicating, and basically understanding what everyone is going through, but commanding from the center, I would say, rather than leading from the top. And I think that inclusive style of management, and typically when you look at management styles, this previously had been described as a very feminine management style. So I'm not very consciously not using the word women because everyone brings in a lot of different individualistic styles. But I think this authentic, inclusive management style is definitely going to be bringing in a difference in the new world of digitalization. Thank you, Shilpa.
Thank you, Sai. Thank you for those insights. Britta, I wanted to hear from you about the role models that you look up to within the organization, outside the organization, in the field of engineering. Can you share your story?
Yes, first of all, thanks for inviting me to this interesting panel discussion. I really appreciate. I think role models should be there independent from the gender, honestly. It doesn't matter if you're a man or female, you should have a role model, someone who really encouraged you to take what you want to do where you are good at. And in my personal, I was very lucky on my own because especially my dad encouraged me to follow my technical talent. And since he was a professor for mathematics, he was also able to introduce me to this field of technology, to the engineering career. So, but I think in principle, everybody should be encouraged. Doesn't matter what gender he or she is.
Thank you. Thank you, Britta. Supriya and Karthik, I would like to hear from you in terms of the technical career ladders that you've created within your organization, for that really that engineering hall of fame. If you can share some of the programs that you run internally, like for instance, you have the Intel fellows, any programs for technical distinction.
Karthik,
No, you go
after
ahead,
you.
Supriya.
All right. So, it's very rare, Karthik, when you be on a panel and you get to say you first, considering the women tend to be in majority. So just wanted
I was just
to
waiting for
have
it,
a nice laugh on
Supriya.
that. Thank you. So, Shilpa, yes, any technology company would have that. So, I don't know if I would say this is something extremely special that we do at Western Digital. I would rather say that at the industry and the global level, I think there are excellent fellows. IBM is known for its excellent fellow program that they do, and of course, Intel too. At Western Digital, we have something similar. The good thing is for any program to work. Like right now, we are here as an audience panelist discussing how does it work, the equality, and then the opportunity, and then the enablement. So I would say those are 2 3 pillars on which our the entire fellowship program is anchored. You have a choice as an engineer, and this is irrespective of gender, when you can choose to go on the management ladder where your people skills, your business acumen, and a lot more techno leadership kind of is critical. But you also have an equal path where the levels, the compensation, the stocks, and everything is equal in proportion. You can also choose to be on a technical ladder and be a principal technologist or a fellow. So there are a lot of conversations that we deliberate on, and to say that how is it that we continue to focus on the technology and the fellowship. And therefore there are a lot of programs that I think we look at in India. I'm very happy to see that at Western Digital India, from the earlier school of thought to say I want to be a people leader, That is such a heartening and a heartwarming thing to see a lot more engineers come forward now to say that I want to be a principal technologist, a fellow. I'd really probably want to go deep in my technology expertise. And then when you look at, we have certain guiding criteria, you need to be there at a, you need to publish a paper. So I think those things are kind of, I wouldn't say very strictly, but broadly defined and give enough opportunity for leaders, for engineers to kind of play with. And then, there is an inventors, how many patents you should have filed, at what level of industry, you ought to be known as a subject matter expert. So I think there are a lot of enablements that happen across the way. And it's a very well run program and one that we are very proud of. And there are every year we celebrate our new fellows to the program. And I would say it's my dream to have a few of those in India. We haven't yet got there, but it's a continuous focus. And with all great talent joining the pipeline and continuing to stay within, I'm sure we will fulfill our dream of having a lot more fellows in India.
Sure, Supriya.
Karthik, over to you.
Sure. No, thanks, Supriya. So at Scient, I also want to bring out saying that while the STEM in India, especially in ER&D, has about only 15% gender diversity, and it was a conscious choice for us to get to about 22% that we are operating already. And we want to see how do we really continue to grow that. With 29 nationalities worldwide, I think this is one of the most diverse group of engineers that you'll see anywhere in India or globally. So having said that, we have three different tracks of career path. This is applicable for everyone in the company, not just for men or women, all of them. And we definitely have something around delivery, which is people can pick up to be a program manager, project manager, delivery head. And we also have the roles on the sales side, like what Sai is playing now as a sales director, business development, marketing, and they can go and lead the sectors and business units. And the technology roles, which kind of starts up as a solution architect and enterprise architect, digital architect, and can go all the way up to the chief technology officer. So we kind of give them a three different tracks for them to choose what is that they're comfortable with, and they can groom themselves in that area of choice and interest for them.
Thanks, Karthik. Helen, I would like to come to you. If you can share how companies like yours are trying to bridge the gender gap, what are some of the initiatives that you've done at your end? If you can share some of the highlights.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. Thank you, Shifa, and thank you to all previous panelists also for very nice insights, like lots of food for thoughts to bring back home as well. I'll come to your question, Shilpa. I would like to just, if you allow me, do a quick build up on what Brita said as a role model topic, because for me, I know that coming from, as you mentioned, I am myself not an engineer, so I'm in an engineering panel today because I've been working mostly with engineers, but I am not an engineer by education, and that brings me also to what Supriya was talking about. I was brought to engineering because there was no woman with the business background. And then they catapulted me a little bit there because I brought that from Airbus, so from another industry. And now the role model that has been very key for me, a topic that has been following me as I moved across industries and across sectors. I mean, I started in the Ministry of Defense, and as you can imagine, there's not a lot of women to be seen there. And I would say even less role models. And I would say even less now that I have grown up and then aged a little bit also. I would say what I would qualify also as a role model, because what I realized coming in management positions as well was that being on top of the iceberg. Oops, sorry. I find being on top of the iceberg, if you're alone because you had to sacrifice so many things on the way, it's maybe not worth it. So basically, when I was in the army, I have far too many fingers to tell you how, like, compared to the woman I could have qualified as role model, but I have not enough fingers to tell to count compared to people who actually told me, forget about it, you're never going to find a role model in the army. That's going to take years and years and years. And the sad part was that I know that some of the people there, and I had male role models as well there, I kind of assumed they were right, because they're there, they're established, and I know they meant well, and they told me, move on, that is maybe not a sector for you if you're really looking up for something like that. And I moved on. But the fun part is, and this is where I'd like to to bring you, it's and the circular economy after, they were wrong. I remember that in 2019, I remember reading an article after Penny Mordaunt was nominated as the UK Defence Minister. And I remember reading that now, from that moment, 7 out of the 10 largest EU defence budgets were basically managed by women. And I was thinking, it didn't take that long. I left NATO in 2016 and we were beginning of 2019. So there's been just 3 years. And when I was in Airbus, when I joined Airbus, there was nowhere to be seen a woman in the management, in the executive committee. And when I left Airbus in 2018, Grazia Vittadini had just been nominated as the head of CTO in engineering. And again, I was very, very positive. And that is really the moment where that prompted a lot of deeper reflections from my side. Not that I've ever regretted moving to engineering and operations, but what it taught me was that it's not because you don't see those role models that they do not exist. And if they do not exist in your sector, and I think this, Supriya, you talked about that, like if they do not exist in your sector, and Sai also, you mentioned that, go look elsewhere because they do exist, and we're all in the same boat, and then we need to bring that transversality. And this is something really that I took from moving from the defense to aerospace and then to transportation. The second point that it taught me was that men as much as women need those role models, because one key point that I've seen across my career at the beginning was I was always underestimated. I would enter a room, I was young, a lady, by default you're underestimated. And that's a social bias somehow, because as Paul was saying, the women have never done that before. So even men lack this kind of referencing. But then I was, okay, I can take it as a challenge, and I can take it as it's bad. It's true, it's bad, it's unfair. But I can also turn it to my opportunity. And I remember spending hours and hours reading some engineering blueprints. And like when you're not an engineer, you do like this, and it all looks always the same, wherever you put it. And at the end, when I was then finally contributing, I had established a credibility, and then it was never ever asked again. So this advantage that we have, we can really make it a strength. And I'm mentoring some other ladies in the industry, and this is something I really try to push. And I'm sure some would disagree, and I'm happy to take the disagreement, but I think that here we really have something. And then the final point, and I will conclude with that in the circular economy, is that at the end, once you've understood all of that, you just realize that you have to be your own change actor. You have to actually bring the role models that your business deserve. And this is something where when I finally joined circular economy from an engineering standpoint as well, I mean, in circular economy, one of the key principles is diversity, and it's diversity of gender, of backgrounds, of locations, of everything. And I think that this panel, and I think Science done an amazing job here. I mean, this panel is super diverse from a gender standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, from a even background, standpoint. So I think that here is the recipe for the next the coming generations. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks. That was insightful. Paul, if I may ask you, what are some of the inherent challenges that you've seen as a part of your research, and how have some of the companies or associations like yours helped others to really break those barriers?
Thank you for that question. The Society of Women Engineers obviously is focused on helping women in engineering and in STEM in all different areas. We work with young girls that are in 6th, 7th, 8th standard to get them interested in STEM and engineering, and all the way through their careers. And so one of the things that was talked about earlier, I think Supriya mentioned, is mentoring and networking is a key element. And a lot of times, whether it's in a live office or even in a virtual office, women don't take the time to talk to one another and to get to know each other and discuss some of the issues that they're having. And this is something that Swede does. They connect people in that way so that they have an opportunity to share stories, learn from best practices, and have an opportunity to grow in a way that they don't normally grow in their job. And it's an important aspect because, when most of our experience is with a live office. And before, the men would go out afterwards, they'd go have a drink, or they'd go have a coffee somewhere, or they'd go out for a long lunch, or they would get together. Typically, the women wouldn't do that. They'd have to be home because they've got to get dinner, or they have to come home to their husbands or to their children or their parents. And they had other obligations that didn't allow them to network and to communicate on a one-to-one basis or even in a small group. So some of the things we do is try to have networking sessions, virtual or in person. At the end of a day, have coffees. Now we're starting to do what we call a virtual coffee, so that you can get together in a small group and discuss some of the issues and some of the things that can help you communicate with other people in your office and build rapport with others in your office. And when we were actually going to office, we used to recommend set aside lunch to get together with a group so that you can chat, and instead of having that networking after hours in the evening, you can have a networking session at lunchtime. So it doesn't add to your day. It doesn't interfere with some of your other personal obligations, but it allows you to have that opportunity to connect with others in your office in a way that you don't get during the course of a regular day. So those are some of the things that we like to recommend, and some of the things that we work towards in reference to your question. I hope
Yes,
that
Paul, it
answers
does.
your
Thank
question.
you. Sangeeta, I wanted to hear from you, when you have increased number of representation of, women engineers at the entry level, but the ratio is skewed when it comes to the mid and the senior level. If you can talk about, some of the programs that you have initiated, and also as a part of the entire Diversity Skills Council, what are some of the programs that you run to educate your own member companies to improve the diversity ratio? Sangeeta, you're on mute. If you may unmute yourself.
Sorry, I keep doing this.
Yeah.
No, I think, thank you, Shilpa. That's a great question because I think the diversity ratios in the IT industry are fairly decent, but a lot of that is at the entry level. And as you move at the middle to senior management, there is a huge leaking pipeline that you may be seeing. So I think NASSCOM being focused on a few different things. One, I think, as Paul talked about, is the whole imperative of mentorship, right? How do you, within organizations, across organizations, how do you enable women to find their mentors, to connect, to get career advice, to understand how do you move up and what do you need to do? So I think that is one very important initiative the NASSCOM Diversity Council has been working on. I think the second is recognition, right? So we run these annual awards where we recognize companies that have actually made this transition possible, where you're seeing more women at executive level or at least at senior management levels. So, the data we saw from the awards last year was that for those sets of companies, there was a 2x improvement in women moving in the middle to senior management level. So clearly, I think rewards and recognition is another important imperative that we continue to drive. I think the third is really about role models, and I loved what Helen and Greta spoke about, and um, Supriya obviously is one herself, but I think our industry has a few role models, but we need many more role models, and especially to the point you had raised earlier, Shilpa, which was about technical career tracks. I think the average employee in this industry, whether male or female, thinks about career progression as how many people do I manage, right? There is very little focus on saying, I want to be a technologist, I'm happy working on my own, I really don't need teams of people. So how, and so NASSCOM's trying to work together to make sure we build pride in being a technologist. So I am a technologist, I'm building things and creating newer things. So I don't need tons of people to manage and be recognized from my career growth from that perspective. And I think lastly for us, it's about upskilling, right? We run these programs because as newer technologies are coming into play, I think the bias on, and I think Sai covered this again, there will be people who know and people who don't know, and women should not get left behind in that journey. So there is a specific program around upskilling women technologists that we've been focused on. It's doing very well. It has live labs, which a lot of our members help run. It has role model programs. It has online stuff. So I think there is a lot happening. But I think one of the points that Paul had raised yesterday, which stayed with me, was this virtual work can actually increase the gap rather than decrease it. And sometimes, because as people get back to work, there should not be an attitude of let the men come back and the women will can still work from home. Or so I think we need to be very upfront in thinking through how do we build these policies so that as we return to the workplace, we don't increase the gaps that already exist.
Thanks, Sangeeta. Karthik, would you like to share your experience on that?
No, I think it's important to really look at it in a holistic fashion because you raised the right point. You will find at the entry level, the number of women engineers who are entering the workforce is very high. But as it moves through the hierarchy, I think it kind of fades away. I think it is to do with, I think one of the panelists talked about starting from the top to make sure that how do we really enable policies. For example, if you're going to provide flexibility, if you're going to offer work-life balance, and what can you do as an organization? Can you offer additional creche facilities if the women who are having young babies, and how do you think they can probably be supported with? And also as they move through the next level, because what I've always seen is they also go through the personal life in terms of how that grows along with the professional growth. And at some point of time, they decide to take a back seat on the professional side. How do you think you can actually provide a lot more flexibility and mentoring and helping them to overcome those challenges? I think that really helps them to continue to go through the journey till the top. I think that's extremely critical in terms of how do you think you are going to help them during the transitionary point and when they're really trying to really at a crossroad between the personal and professional expectations mismatch happens.
Sure. Thanks, Karthik. Supriya, women take a career break or a sabbatical. So, how do companies have a structured program to integrate them back to the workforce? If you can share your thoughts on that.
Sure. Shilpa, I'd like to make a comment also. I love what Sangeeta and Karthik have just said. And, forums like this with Karthik and Sayan taking the lead, I think that conversation having is, I think, extremely important. Because it's an important topic, and I think conversations of this nature obviously help further the agenda and push it. And Karthik being an extremely senior position, leading it for science is just a fabulous way to take it forward. So my gratitude and sincere thanks to say we need more role models like him to come forward and make sure that it's an agenda. Coming back to your question to say that how do we get? I think current is there are great models, and of course once we get into research, you will see there are great companies, consulting companies that have come forward. I know there are a lot of other companies, who have done a lot of focused work, in how do we get women back from the maternity break. When you look at some of I remember when I was in Alcatel-Lucent, I was part of the GEP, the Gender Equality Project that our CEO had signed on. It was presented at World Economic Forum. And one of the indicators was, as women take maternity break, how many come back and stay for another 2 years? Which means the industry, the consultants of gender, balance are looking at that as a very critical metric. And when Karthik said it, that women are leaving, and how do you make sure that you just kind of hang in there a bit for them? I have multiple examples, Shilpa, at a framework level that I have seen, at an individual level that I have seen, when somebody just the going gets tough and you realize that you have office, you have a baby at home, you probably have parents, you have a supporting husband. I'll take that out of the equation. Let's assume you have supporting husband and in-laws. I think those narratives are changing too, and you just know that from a body, from an emotion standpoint, you can't take it anymore, and somehow quitting a job seems to be the only option. So my appeal on this panel is also to say, well, let's say that quitting is not an option. Let's make sure that there is someone around who can help you take a break and therefore see what you can do and have a conversation. Take a flexible job. Today's context allows us that. There are companies that do job sharing. I've been on other panels, and those are wonderful forums to be in to say, well, job sharing is possible too. Well, companies can explore all those options. So I would say that is one, to say quitting is not an option. Changing, modeling your role, flexibility, kind of toning down, slowing your career a bit to go fast later. Well, I think let's look at those options. Once you decide you want to take a break and it's coming out of want than a need, then the whole point is, we, at least at Western Digital India, what we do is we do a phase back to say, all right, you're going, the maternity leave is longer, 6 months. In the world of technology, unfortunately, things do move very fast. So organizations do reskilling, upskilling. We do a phase back program to say, okay, now you're a month or 2 months away. How is it that we can be in touch with you? The team leader is tasked, or the manager, to say, well, send your updates, start bringing them into calls. But as long as they're comfortable, if they want to extend a break, well, totally fine. And a lot of cases are there when you need, like, you need to extend the case for different reasons. So I think that is what my take would be, that companies need to be empathetic, have the programs, and see what they can do. I would say today, talking at industry level, I think COVID offers an excellent opportunity to say the entire world of education has moved online. There are such great programs that are available that will allow you to reskill, upskill. So I would say, the organizations are doing a lot. NASCOM is doing terrific work. Industry is moving. Government is looking at. But I think at some point, women will need to come forward also a lot more and say, I am ready to come back. Here is my hand. I raise it. Now I'm going to find a mentor, a network to be a part of. I'm going to go and take these courses online. And then I'll perhaps work with, and I would say network plays a hugely important role. I think you just have to put yourself out there, and maybe the rejection will be high, but I think the world is opening. I don't think those stereotypes of saying, oh, you've taken a break. I hope I'm talking with my conscience intact, because if there are women who face that there's a high rejection, then I think the world needs to change at a much faster pace. But I know if I'm looking at a resume and there's a break, I'm like, fine. For me, it's an opportunity to make a difference, to bring you back, because there is such seasoned experience and expertise with this individual. Just going and taking a break should not alter that. So I would say, to women, change and use the opportunities to look at reskilling, upskilling. To companies, to have those programs a lot more. And the third point, well, don't give up on your women yet. Just make sure that you're their emotional anchors and networks for them, and have that conversation. I know I've had a conversation with one person very close to my team 3 weeks back, when she said, I'm done. There is so much of work load, which Paul spoke about, that I don't think I can manage. It was just a bad day. But all you need is sometimes a little bit of an outburst and someone to talk loud with and aloud with. And I think once you do that, you tend to calm down and stay a little longer, and then a little longer. So I would say, don't quit. If you do quit, we'll bring you back, but please don't quit. Don't quit as the
Right.
first option. If it's a last option and it's coming a want, of course, we'll respect that. That would be my comment, Shilpa.
Thank you, Supriya. That's a great takeaway. Quitting is not the answer. Moving to Sai, if you can share your experience, how you're impacting other your peers or other women employees in the organization by mentoring or being a part of a network, because sales is a really hard job. Very few people make it to the top, and especially fewer women.
Sure. I definitely agree to that point that you've made, Shilpa. I mean, coming from personal experience, right, there was a point in time when I was very, doubtful about, do I want to be doing this job? It's going to require me to travel. Will I have the right support system? Will people actually accept me seriously and, take me seriously when I'm sitting in a room and trying to talk, and present stuff? And all of these thoughts. And I think, I would go back to one, obviously having that guidance, seeing representation, seeing people do that has been very important. Now, if you look at, some aspiring sales women obviously come over to me and ask me questions such as, how are you able to manage your work-life balance? How can we do that? And I think what's, very heartening to see as well, the fact that just about few months back, whatever was seen as a constraint, right, I can't travel, and all of that, the mind shift is moving from I can't do that to looking at, internally looking at, well, basically I'm really good at building my relations. I think I can add logic, and I think that I can help in negotiation. I think I can collaborate and work with different teams across the globes. And I think, I've seen women who are, speaking to me, and we're having these discussions, move from, focusing on everything that was a barrier to focusing on everything that is positive in them and they wanting to do that. And I think when somebody comes to that mind shift, it's about holding those specific positive points and saying, well, I think this is what you got to focus on, and I think this is what you need to, propel yourself into career. And I did see somebody asked a question, what about what grit need to push yourself, and I think it's absolutely true, because I remember one incident when I was because the industry that I represent sometimes needs me to travel to maintenance or workshops that are really far away from the city, and I was traveling the cab, and the driver turned back 3-4 times, and he said, "Are you sure you want to go to this place?" Because it was where heavy industrial equipment was being manufactured, and he didn't think I would want to be going there or actually having anything to do with a place like that. So there are a lot of barriers that you have to face, and obviously courage, determination, passion to want to be doing that. I think those are what I encourage my teams, or my friends even, who want to take up this career, and tell them, at times when you think you got to stop, you have to start thinking about what are you really passionate about yourself. And I think that really helps go a long way.
Thank you, Sai. Rita, do you want to share your thoughts on some of the advisory that you would share for aspiring women engineers?
I think, yeah, what you have to do is really following what you like to do. And with that one, you can do everything. And I think this is as well also my career. This was always the case. Yeah, for example, maybe I'm allowed to share a few highlights of my career. So when I started, I think there are two career paths, right? The technical one, of course, the project I've been working with, and also the management one. The project is when I started at Infineon almost 20 years back, I was able or got the opportunity to invent Bluetooth. And so now, 20 years later, seeing that it's still there, that Bluetooth is alive, and my kids and my grandparents, everybody is using it in daily life, this makes me really proud that I was part of this group having the opportunity to invent it. And the second highlight of my career from a project perspective is definitely the when I was at Intel, I was lead architect, and we got the chance to develop a modem chip, which made it at the end in the Apple iWatch. And so now you can take your Apple iWatch and just take a phone call without having your phone connected, and that's because we have invented it. And this makes you so proud. And if you are working on things which you like, where you are really burning on, this is then doesn't matter if you're man or female, you can just do it because you love it. And on my management career, yeah, okay, and there I was very lucky, and I was happy that I was asked at some point in time whether I can take over a team of 12 people, 12 architects. And so I jumped from the just technical leading role towards also management leading role. And of course, my second highlight in my career is when I joined Signed this year, when I was asked to lead the German Duisburg site as a site lead, and in parallel to the technical work, working on real great projects. I'm project lead for medical projects, so this is great. So summarizing, you can do it if you love it, and if you think that you can do it, doesn't matter what gender you are.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank all the panelists for joining us today for this invigorating conversation. Thank you all. I would also like to take this opportunity to unveil Science signature platform, the CXO Science, to build powerful and trusted conversations on highly relevant topics for today's disruptive digital age. CXO Science brings together influencers, technologists, futurists, policymakers, and industry leaders to engage with the larger audiences through podcasts, webinars, LinkedIn Live, Twitter Live sessions. Some of the global leaders who have collaborated on CXO Science to share their expertise and point of view include Amit Fadnis, Chief Digital Officer of GE Healthcare, Des Blanchfield, founder and CEO of Social, Basil Skarsala, CEO of UKPN, Diana Singh, Chief Change Agent at Flying Elephant, Sir Dominic Asquith, former British High Commissioner to India, John Hoffman, CEO of GSMA Limited, and many more. Some of the themes that SIDE is looking to explore through this platform include building a digital DNA, nurturing diversity and inclusion, leading tectonic shifts, designing industries of tomorrow, appreciating macroeconomic perspectives. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.
Thank you so much, Shilpa. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.